On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas goes on the road. For the first time, we preview Kansas at Creighton.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, Blue Sky Derek Johnson, and this is Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And thank you to the everydayers tuning in to each and every show. And thank you for making it your first listen every day. We're going to be previewing number one Kansas going on the road against the Creighton Blue Jays, first true road game of the year for Kansas. We'll get into our headlines for the matchup. We'll get into our opponent scouting report of Creighton, matchups of the game, players to watch, plenty more coming at you on today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So this one taking place on Wednesday night, 7:30, late night game, I guess. I don't know. KU plays on the date, whatever. This will be KU's first true road game of the season, and it's a week where KU has two true road games when you're looking at this game, when you're looking at the Missouri game upcoming on Sunday. And so, obviously playing on the road in college basketball is very difficult. You can be playing, a much lesser opponent, and that's still going to be very difficult. We saw that last year. Obviously, Kansas didn't have one of the better teams last year, but their first road game of the season was at Indiana. That was not a great Indiana team, and Kansas almost lost that game. Indiana played a good game. So you're going to have a fired-up home crowd with Creighton and then Missouri on the weekend as well. That's going to make things more difficult for you. And in the case of Creighton, it is a tough home court environment. They really fill that place out. It's a big arena. It holds around 20,000 people, so you get loud. And they have pulled some big upsets over the years. You look at beating UConn in some of these years and some of these other highly ranked Big East teams and opponents that they've gotten to play. They've done really well on their home court in their time under their head coach, Greg McDermott. And I'll be interested to see what the visiting attendance is like for Kansas. Because obviously this is a 3-hour drive basically for people from Lawrence to go up to the game. And are they going to have a good road contingent to this game, especially with some of the early season struggles for Creighton to this point? I would imagine this was one, though, that a lot of Creighton fans circled before the season started and bought their tickets and are excited to get the opportunity to play against. So it'll be interesting to see with KU how much they get up to this game. I think it's really interesting because I don't know. It seems like there's a contingent of Creighton fans that hate Kansas. Is that a thing? I've seen some of that on social media, which I've always been like, wait, what? Because it's like you're rarely playing against each other. I don't know. I've always thought Creighton was kind of cool. I don't know. I don't know what's up with that. Anyway, this is going to be a interesting rematch of some fun past matchups. You have the 2022 NCAA tournament game, which Creighton nearly pulled an upset over Kansas that Kansas ends up winning that game, gets by, and ends up winning the national championship. And you can look back and, obviously the North Carolina game took the craziest comeback for Kansas, being down 15 points at the half. And, you were down early in the Miami game. And the Providence game got a little dicey late after you gave up a big run to them with I don't know, around under 8 minutes to go, something like that. I would say outside of the Carolina game, though, the Creighton game was probably the closest Kansas got to losing in that NCAA tournament game. It was a pretty crazy game, but there's a lot of new faces on both teams since then. And I think what's interesting, too, in that 2022 game, Ryan Kalkbrenner was injured in the previous game, didn't end up playing. He's injured right now. Is he going to end up playing? That's one of the other key headlines into this one. Before that, the previous matchup, 2020, it was 73-72 in Allen Fieldhouse. That was a crazy game. As well. That was with the COVID year, so it was like cardboard cutouts in the stands and stuff. And then before that, you have to go all the way back to 1974 for the previous matchup. There's plenty more beyond that, but that was a barn burner 55-54 Kansas win in the Midwest Regional semifinal. Then Kansas ended up beating Oral Roberts in the next round, made the Final Four. Roger Morningstar, the father of Brady Morningstar, had 18 points to lead the way for Kansas in that game. There's a little trivia for you. Okay, what about the opponent scouting report here for the Blue Jays? Creighton comes in at 5-3 on the season. They have a nice top 100 win in their most recent game over Notre Dame, and it is an even better win considering they were without Ryan Kalkbrenner, which, again, that is one of the big headlines. Is Kalkbrenner going to play? Did not play in the last game, but I don't know. It would make you think that playing the number one team in the country at home, I don't know. I just feel like if you were making me guess, I would assume he plays, but I don't know that for sure. Now, all three losses, it's not necessarily truly indicative that they're just this close to 500 team at 5-3, because all three losses are to good teams. They're all the top 50 Ken Palm opponents. Now, two of them did come by double digits. They lost by 11 and 18 in two of them, so that's not great. They also had some closer games, like their season opener, despite Kalkbrenner having like 50 points, was kind of a closer game than you'd expect against a not great opponent. And for those reasons, they're now ranked around the 40 range, around the 50 range on Bart Torvik and Ken Palm. But also you have to take into mind, like their loss to San Diego State, for instance, that was without their really good point guard and Stephen Ashworth. Right. And then you also have Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's, getting injured along the way. So they've been a little bit beat up. I think they're better than the record indicates, or where some of those rankings indicate, especially with you playing them on their home floor. So you look at that personnel, Stephen Ashworth, he is in year 2 with the program, transferred in from Utah State, where he was part of that Utah State team that made the tournament, lost to Missouri in the first round, ends up going to Creighton. And so far this year, he's been money, 15 points per game, 41% from three, over 5 assists per game. He's a stud on the offensive end of the floor. 6'2", Pop Isaacs. You might remember him from Texas Tech. He is a chucker. He plays both the 1 and the 2, over 14 points, over 4 rebounds, almost 4 assists per game. He can hit threes from really deep. He can hit some really tough shots, but also sometimes the shot selection isn't great. And he's only shooting 36% from the floor right now, shooting 33% from three. He is somebody who you go into a given game, and if you're Kansas, you hope it's not one of these bigger games. Pop Isaacs could easily go 4 of 15 in this game. Pop Isaacs could also easily hit 6 threes in this game. Like, that's the type of player that he is. So you got to make sure you contain him and prevent one of those explosion games. Then they've got Jemiah Neal, who's a transfer from Arizona State, 6'5" guard who plays kind of on the wing for them. And he's been a good player on both ends of the floor. Good defender, filling up the stat sheet, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 4.5 assists per game, just doing a little bit of everything, 44% from the field. He has struggled from three-point range, which that's been the thing in his career. Like, he's always shooting in the mid to high 20% from three, going back to his Arizona State time. So not a great three-point shooter, but does a lot of other things to help the team win games. At the 4, they pretty much have a couple 6'10" guys that are stretch 6'10" big men that are kind of very similar to each other. So Jackson McAndrew and Isaac Trout. McAndrew is putting up really good production, 8 points, 5 rebounds in 18 minutes a game. And then you have Trout, who also, the idea of both those players that they can be these stretch big men, both of them are only shooting 31% from three right now. But the true talent shooting might be that they're both better than that, and they do create some matchup problems by both being 6'10", but being able to shoot the ball on the offensive end of the court. And then, of course, at center, theoretically, if he plays, is the 7'1" Ryan Kalkbrenner. He's been fantastic when he has played this year. 18 points, 8.6 rebounds, 3 blocks per game, 78% from the floor. If he can't go in this game, maybe you see some small ball with Trout and McAndrew at the 5, which would cause Kansas some defensive issues, but would be good for the Kansas offense. And you'd also see you'll see this guy regardless, but you just see more of him. 6'9", 250-pound Frederick King, who has modest numbers so far this season and throughout his career at Creighton, but in the game he got to start without Ryan Kalkbrenner, 14 points, 5 rebounds, 4 blocks. So acquitted himself just fine in that matchup. Now, what they do well. Offensively, this is a top 15 offense in 2-point percentage. They're shooting over 60% on 2-point shots so far this season, but do keep in mind that in the game against Notre Dame without Kalkbrenner, they shot just 52% on 2-point shots. So that's a big difference there if they don't have him in this game. They've been knocked down on free throw shooting. They've been a great passing team. I mean, all 3 of those guards can really pass it and get 4 or 5 assists in the game for you. They also launch a ton of threes. And they want to play fast. They don't really go for offensive rebounds. Like, some teams you see low offensive rebound rates or low D, whatever, right? Because they're just not a good offensive rebounding team. Other times you see teams with low offensive rebound rates because they're just like, no, everybody get back. We don't want to give up transition points. We don't need the offensive rebounds. And so for Creighton, they're one of those teams. They're not really giving up much in terms of the transition game, and that's been a strength of one of this team. They're in the 95th percentile right now in transition defense, only giving up 5.4 transition points per game, which counters what Kansas wants to do on the offensive end of the court. So that becomes interesting. On the defensive end, they don't foul. Like, Kalkbrenner is an elite rim protector, 3 blocks per game. throughout his career, he's been elite at playing vertical and not fouling. They've got a top 25 2-point defense. And when you look at the Kalkbrenner era, like they've been solid at 3-point defense every year, which makes sense because if you have that really good shot protector back at the back end, as a guard, hey, if I get beat off the bounce on a drive, like I have that guy back there, I'm going to have an easier time contesting on the outside, knowing that in the back of my mind, right? So more contested shots gonna, over the long haul, mean teams don't shoot as well from three against you. Now, what they've struggled with this year, they've turned the ball over a lot. And a lot of them have been by nature of just getting the ball stolen. Their two lead guards, Isaacs and Ashworth, really good assist numbers, but they're also averaging almost 6 turnovers per game. They haven't been a great offensive rebound team, as we talked about, but again, that's strategic. They do shoot one of the highest 3-point rates in the country in terms of the number they get up, but they haven't shot them efficiently. They haven't made as many. They're only shooting 31% so far. Now, is that just, are they a really good shooting team? Because usually they are under Greg McDermott, and they just have had a slow start 3-point shooting, and there's going to be a big reversion to the mean coming, and you hope it's not this game. I don't know. They also really aren't like forcing turnovers on the defensive end. They're ranking near the bottom nationally in turnover and steal rate defense. So as far as the importance of this one, showing you can win on the road, continuing your dominance overall, and trying to pick up another resume-building win in this one against, Creighton on the road, which even if Creighton isn't, a top 20 team like maybe you thought in the preseason, they're probably still going to be high enough that this is either going to be a quad 1 or quad 2 win because it's on the road by the end of the season. All right, let's continue on matchups of the game. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by Better Together. Introducing Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent and you can play with your friends, not against them. Pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join the social DFS movement. Better Together is the first cooperative daily fantasy application. Better Together provides a sense of camaraderie and enhances the social experience of watching sports. Because there's nothing like, you might think that, this team's going to win, but it's a lot more fun when you're cheering with somebody else, when you're cheering with your friends, when you're able to, exchange texts over the group text with some of your friends that you're all in this together. And it makes you realize that DFS is fun alone, but like a lot of other things, it's just better with friends. It's a way to stay connected with friends, too, when you can't watch sports together in person. Put your group chat to the test. Let's prove yours is the best. Download Better Together now from the App Store and sign up using promo code Locked On for a chance to win your share of over $1,000 in cash prizes. Play with me in a contest, and remember the code Locked On because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Thank you to everydayers tuning in to each and every episode. Check out Locked On College Football, Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. All right, matchups here. Number 1, Kansas defending the 3-point arc. So yes, again, Creighton is only shooting 31% from 3 so far this season. They've yet to really get it going there. They haven't shot it super well. And yes, I do think some of that could be poor shot selection at times. Like I do think that contributes to it. But I think the long history here with their head coach and even some of the personnel you look at. I mean, Ashworth is shooting over 40% from 3, but there is enough there that it scares you because the exorbitant amount of threes that they take, 30. They're taking 30 3-point attempts per game. Okay? Meanwhile, think about this. So they're taking 30 3-point attempts per game. They've only taken 20 mid-range shots for the entire season. This is a team that values the analytics, shooting at the rim, shooting 3 balls. And they had a game to show you this. Now, this was not a good 3-point shooting game, but it shows you that they have no problem letting it fly. Against Nebraska, they went 5 of 10 on 2-point shots. They went 12 of 42 on 3-point shots. Now, part of that was there was a good article in The Athletic from CJ Moore talking about some of the teams started to, after Ryan Kalkbrenner's early dominance, do what Fairleigh Dickinson did to Zach Edey and Purdue in the NCAA tournament, where they basically just bracketed the big man down low and said, we're going to dare you to shoot threes. And because Creighton hadn't been hitting threes in the early portion of the season, it worked very well. But in this game, they're playing at home. They're going to be ramped up. If they're hot from 3, it's going to be tough to beat because they're coming at such a high volume, right? It's one thing if a team shoots 40% from 3 and they're only taking 16 in a game. It's like you can overcome that. They're taking 30 a game. If they hit 13 of them, if they hit 14 of them, it's going to be really hard to win this game. You're going to have a really good three-point shooting game or do a lot of other things at an elite level if you're Kansas to win this one. So defend the three-point arc as much as possible. And when you look at the two main culprits, Ashworth and Isaacs are the two that I'm looking at. But it's also they have big men who can shoot, which could be a problem for KU because we've seen them struggle with some stretch big men. So I'll be interested to see what some of the defensive adjustments in this game are for Bill Self on the defensive end of the floor. And when you look at it, all three of Creighton's losses this year were by far their least efficient offensive games because teams were able to either get lucky from three-point defense or do a good job guarding the three-point line on the defensive end of the court. Number two, if Kalkbrenner plays especially, but regardless either way, KU still finding easy buckets inside. Creighton is 0-3 this season when allowing teams to shoot 47% or higher on two-point shots. When teams are below that mark, they're 5-0. Now, that's not even like that big of a number. But it also goes back to last year when they had Ryan Kalkbrenner. Last year, they were 8-6 in games where teams shot 47% or higher on twos. So basically a coin flip for them. When they held teams to below 47% on twos, they were 17-4. Right? There's a big difference there. There's been a big difference. So that means over the last two seasons now, they're 8-9 when teams shoot 47% or better. And they're 22-4 when they don't. So if you can score on the inside against, something that for them is a strength normally, and it's score on the inside and score from two, it not even like an elite or a great rate, just not like a really bad one, you can beat them, right? It's turning one of their strengths into basically more of just a neutral, I guess. And the problem is teams have only shot under 60% at the rim against them, only 43% on all two-point shots this season against them. It's obviously easier said than done. Kalkbrenner getting 3 blocks per game. He's been great so far this season and throughout his career at helping limit things on the defensive end of the court. If he goes, obviously this one becomes a lot more difficult. How much is Hunter Dickinson going to be able to just try to score over him theoretically? Because it's one thing when a guy's blocking shots as a help defender. If they're the same size, is he going to be able to get some of his post moves off? So it'll be an important game for Hunter if Kalkbrenner does go. Number 3, floater game strong. Creighton opponents only take 20% of their shots at the rim. So about 1 in every 5 shots going against the Creighton defense is at the rim. Well, the Division I average is closer to 30%. And the reason why, again, this all goes back to Kalkbrenner. This all goes back to the rim protection. If you have a big 7'1" dude who's good at blocking shots and you drive to the rim and you see him right there, you're probably not taking that shot. So as effective as they are defending at the rim, they've also done a great job at scaring you from taking shots at the rim, which helps make them an even better defense. But teams have also shot a bunch of shots in the paint, but away from the rim against this team, like higher than the national average, which are basically floaters, push shots, basically those 5 to 10 foot shots in the paint, runners, things like that, which again makes sense because you're seeing the 7'1" dude who blocks a lot of shots, and you're like, you know what? Instead of going into him and trying to lay it up over him and getting it blocked, I'm just going to pull up from a few feet back and throw up a high floater that hopefully goes in. Usually those are a little lower percentage than layups, obviously, which makes sense why, but those are going to be shots you get more often if Kalkbrenner can go, which means think about the players who take a good amount of those floaters, push shots, short mid-ranges, runners. It's KJ Adams, it's Dajuan Harris, it's Zeke Mayo, it's mid-range shots from Hunter Dickinson on little pick and pops. Those 4 guys really need to be on their game. Now that's 4 of your 5 starters, so obviously they needed to be on their game anyway, but like those are KU's 4 leaders in terms of paint shots, not at the rim shots. The good news is all 4 of them do rank above average to good compared to the rest of the country in field goal percentage in that zone, in that area. All of them are in the 54th percentile or better in shooting percentage in that area. So again, all of them are above average or better, most notably Dajuan Harris, who is in the 78th percentile at 53% in such shots. Let's get to players to watch. Maybe Dajuan will come up there. Maybe some of these other players. We'll get to that on the other side for Kansas Creighton. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode today is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You can bet on the Kansas Creighton game. Time recording not up yet. Probably they're waiting to see what's the status of Ryan Kalkbrenner, but you'll be able to do that. There's also betting in Iowa, not I believe in Nebraska, but you can just cross the river from where the stadium is, go to that. There's like a casino over there. You're on the Iowa side, pull up, boom, you're good to go. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Well, if Kansas wins, go treat yourself to the Drover afterwards. Actually, it'll probably be closed, but, you can have some fun up in Omaha. A lot of fun stuff to do. All right, players to watch for this one, Kansas and Creighton. Let's go with our player matchup. This is obvious. It's Hunter Dickinson versus Ryan Kalkbrenner if Kalkbrenner is healthy. You have two All-American big men going at each other. What does that matchup look like, right? And everything we talked about in the team matchups, like those two guys can have a heavy impact on it for both ways of the court. Now, if Kalkbrenner isn't healthy in this game, I think it goes to Dajuan Harris versus Stephen Ashworth. Ashworth has been an elite shooter. He's a really good offensive player. He hasn't been the best defensive player, so Dajuan maybe can score a little bit. Plus, you go back to the Dajuan floaters, and Ashworth does have higher turnover numbers. Maybe Dajuan can get some steals there, so I think that'll be a fun matchup. Offensive end of the court for Hawks to soar here. Players we think can have good games. I'm going to go Zeke Mayo. Neither of Creighton's lead guards are great defenders when you look at like Evan Miyakawa or, I don't know, some of these other places. And for a game that could have a bit more pace, a bit more transition to it, I think that fits Zeke Mayo's game. I think he's comfortable in the open court and scoring some points, and he has a good little floater game and good touch to him in that mid-range floater area. So I think Zeke Mayo could have a good game in this one. Defensive side of the ball, we're going to go Dajuan Harris. There's two lead guards for them, Ashworth and Isaacs, combined 5.6 turnovers per game. If you add Jemiah Neal, who's their basically third guard, that's 8 turnovers per game between the three of them. And Harris is KU's best thief. Obviously, he's going to have his hands full with Ashworth, but he's also a smaller guard too, so you don't have to worry about giving up a ton of physicality or being overpowered there either. So we'll go to Dajuan Harris on the defensive end of the floor. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back at you for a recap of whatever happens in the KU Creighton game as well. So stick around for that right here with Locked On Jayhawks. See you next time.